obligatory. Thanks for everybody showing up. Let me do the obligatory announcement. Good evening or good afternoon. As chair of the vice chair of the Facilities Advisory Committee for the town of Exeter, I am declaring that an emergency exists and I am invoking the provisions of RSA 91-A:2, 3B. Federal, state, and local officials have determined that gatherings of 10 or more people pose a substantial risk to our community in its continuing efforts to combat the spread of COVID-19. In concurring with their determination, I also find that this meeting is imperative to the continued operation of town government and services, which are vital to public safety and confidence during this emergency. As such, this meeting will be conducted without a quorum of this body physically present in the same location. At this time, I will also welcome members of the public accessing this meeting remotely, even though this meeting is being conducted in a unique manner under unusual circumstances. The usual rules of conduct and decorum apply. I also want to welcome Joanna Bartell, who will be taking the minutes for our meeting. She is going to not be in attendance, but she'll be watching us on video. So Amanda and Mark, I think you two are off the hook. And if I've misunderstood whether she was starting today or the next meeting, Bob, I assume we can have a transcript ready just in case, a paper transcript, is that right?
I think so.
Great, appreciate that. Okay, so let's start the meeting by taking roll call attendance. When each member states their name, please state whether there's anyone in the room with you during this meeting. My name is Peter Lennon. I am alone in the room. Robert Corson.
Robert Corson, I am here and I am alone in my room.
Amanda Kelly.
Amanda Kelly, here and alone.
Mark Layton.
Mark Layton, I'm here and by myself.
Okay, Judy Rowan, as a member of the Budget Committee.
Here and I'm alone.
Great, and I welcome Chief Schoolin and Chief Wilking and Town Planner Dave Sharples. All right, so let's just get right to the agenda. Does anyone have any changes to the minutes from the last meeting? And if so, by all means, please raise them now. And if not, I'll entertain a motion to move the minutes, to approve the minutes as drafted.
Make a motion to approve the minutes as drafted.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. The minutes from April 15, 2021 as drafted be approved. I'll call a roll. Rob Corson.
Approve.
Amanda Kelly.
Approve.
Mark Layton.
Approved.
And myself, Peter Lennon, approved. So the minutes have been approved by a vote of 4-0. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the Public Safety Complex Study. And I was hoping that Daryl might be here to perhaps give us a sense of what was presented to the select board. I sent everyone around and marked it as well, a notice or a copy of the article in the Exeter newsletter for the Friday after the meeting on April 26th in front of the select board. And I guess since I don't know whether any of us attended, did anyone on the facilities committee have a chance to listen in any way?
No.
I did not. I've gone through the executive summary and part of the report, but I did not watch the video.
Right. I must admit, I haven't watched the video. I've gone through the final report, both all the facilities related pages, both for fire and police. And I have to tell you that I really don't know how accurate this article by Alexander Lacasse is, because there's really nothing in the report that references a direct recommendation that the fire department stay in the renovated public safety center and the police department become a resident of a new building. Nor is there any mention of a possible satellite fire station in the northern part of town.
There is a mention, Peter. There actually is a mention of a second fire station. It actually recommends that either it stays consolidated in a new location or a fire station in a alternate location.
Right, that's correct. But it does not say in the northern part of town. And yes,
No,
you're right.
no.
Rob, thanks for correcting me. I didn't mean to imply that. I guess, Chief, your and Russ's names were kind of evoked in the article. So I guess I have to ask, was there any analytical work done by the Center for Public Safety Management that would back up this new recommendation from them, as opposed to the recommendations that were in the final report?
Not to my knowledge. I think when we spoke to Joe Pozzo and Chief Mark Pylan, we asked the question because we felt some of their recommendations were vague, were meant to be vague. Their answer to us was they don't establish public policy for a community. They don't establish, other than guidance, the recommendation that, the facility is too small, or perhaps it's outlived its usefulness. It wasn't their understanding of the study that they were to develop sites and make absolute recommendations. So when they delivered their 30-minute summary, it was simply to mention that Russ and I had chatted with them. We read through their 3 recommendations, which was kind of aligned the same as we're chatting about here. Does it make sense to renovate? Is there a way to keep it together? Does it make more sense to separate due to space and perhaps, would there be increased or decreased costs? But no additional data has been collected since the 2018 into 19, I believe. I'm trying to remember.
Both the dates on the final reports for the police department, I think, was June or July. Correct me, Chief Poulin, if I'm wrong. The date for the fire department final report was December of 2020. But I would like the record to show then, in addition to what Chief Wilking has said, that there is absolutely no mention in the report or analysis in the report that would yield a recommendation. There is no recommendation in the report that the fire department should stay downtown and that the building should be renovated for them, and that the police department would move, and that there would be a satellite fire station in the northern part of town. The reason I raise this is because we're sitting here trying to figure out how to spend $100,000 on additional work on a feasibility study. And the CPSM representative basically anointed a particular conclusion without necessarily having done the work that would narrow the analysis that was done in their final reports toward that conclusion. So I don't know how we're going to reconcile what they've said lately.
The study. That's not my interpretation of the study. I think some of us read the recommendations as based on their data. Most of the events, the fire EMS events occurred in the downtown area. That's all they were pointing out. So it was most likely that some fire facility would need to be in the downtown area where most of the work would take place. But they were.
I appreciate that, Judy, but that's not what it says in the study. The study provides data that would support that, but the study consciously does not take a position on where to put either a new combined facility or what to do with either the fire department facility now or the police department.
We just move on. There's no specific recommendation. They provided data. They tried to remain neutral, and it was clear in the study that it was up to the town from a values, financial point of view, what choices would be made. So that's why we're now doing this next step.
So I think obviously just quickly is that obviously there's information in the report that actually could target a specific area based upon the guidelines that were mentioned in there, plus the heat map that associated the locations for the greatest amount of activity. So obviously they didn't pinpoint one, but there is data that's associated that would allow someone to be able to define an area that is the distance away from the greatest amount of risk. So I believe that there is information in there that would allow that. And
I would agree.
Rob,
with you.
I'll just add to that, Rob, that there is, it's not a recommendation, but they did give it an opinion of where one of the locations would take care or would handle more of the calls, I would say, right? There's 3 options that they lay out, and they give an opinion of which option would handle more calls and it could be a better location. I think it's also, if we're going to get into what the report recommended, I mean, they do have a clear paragraph in the report of what they recommend for next steps, right? So I think they talk about a space analysis that should be done, space needs assessment that should be done. They also recommend that the town consider the concept of a single public safety building if the concept proves to be cost efficient. So they did come out with a clear recommendation that way of a single, they don't say where, they just say that it makes that there's efficiencies gained by having both fire and police together, right? So, I mean, there is a recommendation that's in here.
Right. And in there also is the listing of options of renovate the fire department, renovate the public safety center for the fire department, move the police, renovate the public safety center for the police, move the fire department, as well as this combined center. The reason I wanted to raise this and I wanted to be sure about it is because we're sitting here trying to figure out with this RFQ, what's going to be studied for $100,000. And I don't want people to come away already thinking that the Center for Public Safety Management has narrowed our options down to what was reported in the paper. If that was the case, and that was what they recommended, then that would be significant as to what we would do in the in the study, in the feasibility study. So as long as all of the options are open, whatever number we decide are the right options, that's fine. I just don't want people to, either the town, the public, or anybody else in town who deals with these issues, to think that the Center for Public Safety Management has anointed one-point solution. We're not there yet.
No.
So with that, the next thing we were going to discuss was the final draft of the RFQ, and Dave put together all the comments from everybody who sent them in. And I was going to ask if anybody on the Facilities Advisory Committee had any suggested reaction to Dave's amalgamation and where, if it needs to be further amended.
So I'll just jump in. So Dave, I just have one comment for you to consider, and it's in, I don't have it up, but I think it was in the beginning when you were describing the scope, is that you talk about feasibility study. I would suggest that you add a space needs analysis also with that. I think it's in the outline that you include, but I would just suggest that you add some wording that's part of the scope. If you agree that that's part of the scope, the space needs analysis, which is in line with the report that we have, and the feasibility study, which then looking at the options to consider. So that would be my only comment, Peter.
You're saying put that in the introduction? in the,
There was, I'll bring it up if I can, but it was like you had described kind of the scope of work. It was like maybe page 1 or 2, and it was just a suggestion of that you put in that there's space needs analysis or assessment. I'll try to bring it up.
It's in the last. It's the last paragraph of the background, I think, Mark.
Okay.
The town is seeking a qualified consultant to aid the town by conducting a feasibility study that will
Yeah,
So
I think that's
you could add.
correct.
You could add the space needs analysis in that last paragraph in that background section.
I just take a look at it. I mean, it's up to you, Dave. I mean, that's just my comment as far as just including that, and it ties in with the CPSM report.
I just showed it. I just changed it. It just says, just town conducting a feasibility study and space needs analysis that will compare the.
Perfect. Yeah, and it looks like it was in the scope outline. I mean, it looked like it was over there. So thank you. Yeah, that was it.
There are a couple of typos, Dave, that I found, but I don't want to bother taking up time now, although there are 2 or 3. Do we need to vote to, are there any other comments or any issues or anything of that sort?
I have.
Judy?
I'm not sure if my memory is correct, but I believe the town actually voted down the second substation twice. We don't want to mislead somebody doing this analysis that it's a automatic thing, that if their recommendation were for the substation, that it would be a shoe-in on the town side. It's quite controversial still, I believe.
There's a in the background, Judy, there's a sentence that says the fire substation remained in the capital improvement program for many years, but it was never funded.
Yeah.
Are you saying we need to add the fact that it was rejected by the voters twice to that sentence?
Yeah, that it was rejected an additional time and remained in the CIP and never funded since that point. I know it's sort of a sore spot with Chief Como, but that's what.
Dave, can you just make a point of adding the fact that it was rejected twice by the voters?
Yes.
If I may, and I'm going to hate myself for doing this because I should ask myself, why am I talking? This is your meeting, but I believe that to be inaccurate. It was voted down once prior to my arrival in 2005 and never placed. It never got beyond the Budget Committee, CIP, and the Board of Selectmen after that. The town has never seen a true substation since the early 2000s. I want to say 2003, 2004. I would ask before we change that to truly look at that. I do not believe that to be accurate.
Yeah, I think that would be important that we have an accurate statement of the history here. Don't want to mislead someone as to the amount of public work necessary should that option be the most desirable.
Okay, as written now, there's a direct reference to the rejection in 2003. And then there's the sentence that says the fire substation remained in the CIP for many years, but was never funded. I mean, that basically, it basically captures what you and the chief have both said, doesn't it, Judy?
It does, but my memory was that there was a second time that the substation was voted down. But, as long as the person being hired is aware that there's a public issue here, that the second substation is controversial.
Dave, I'm assuming that can be easily transmitted to whichever consultant is ultimately hired.
Can I just pipe in here? Obviously, we're good. I think it's good to be accurate, but we do not need to editorialize this event. So I think it being accurate and giving the correct information, but not necessarily having a specific point of view expressed in the RFP is important.
You don't want to put the person off from taking the job, that there isn't public support for some change.
Well, Judy, I think once ultimately we decide on the site options that we want to include in the feasibility study, by definition, the satellite substation is probably, it may not go away, but it's going to be a lesser than primary option. I mean, so I don't think that the consultant's going to come away thinking that the town is very excited about supporting a fire substation.
And do remember, this is actually going out to a consultant. It's not a town scenario. This is a specific to their charge. So I think ultimately getting it out there is more important. Making sure that history is accurate.
It's also just getting qualifications, right? All we're doing is getting qualifications from vendor. So it's just trying to get these back, and then so that Dave can have negotiations. We'll select somebody and have negotiations. And at that point, I think it's really good to clarify what options could be politically charged. So.
Yeah, other than that, I thought the background really condensed a lot of history and did it in a meaningful way.
So I guess, Dave, I mean, hearing no objection from anybody on our committee, I'll get you those typos, and there shouldn't be any delay to you putting it out. And as you say, we don't need to take a vote, or do you want us to take a vote formally approving it?
I don't think that's necessary. And thank you for the typos. I'm a stickler to that. So thank you for seeing those. I hadn't done that final review yet, but thank you for doing it. And I'll get it out either tomorrow or Monday.
Okay, great. The next item on the agenda is the site options. And you guys all got the list of 9 that I put together as just a hypothetical, throw everything in there. I'm not pushing anything in particular. I think several or most of these are going to fall off. The RFQ and the study itself talk about narrowing it down to 3 options, I think, Dave, am I right? And then from there it goes to 1, or 3 or 4 options to 1. Am I right on that?
Which one are you talking about? Which?
In the RFQ,
What?
in the statement of work, there's a discussion.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say there's a discussion about site evaluations and facility options. And we all agreed.
Go ahead.
Sorry. And we all agreed that at some point, not to delay the issuing of the RFQ, but at some point, the town had to tell the consultant that we hire, hey, these are the 3 or 4 most viable options that we want you to analyze, and then to go through the process to arrive at 1 preferred option out of those 3 or 4. And is that right? I mean, does anybody else on the committee, the facilities committee, remember differently? Because I'm struggling here a little bit.
Well, yeah.
I mean, what's the right number? Sorry, Mark.
Yeah, I'm looking at the RFQ right now. I mean, it talks about there's basically 3 options that we identify, and then there's a 4th one that just says other. So, which mean, I think this is a good step. And then, I think once a firm is selected in negotiations, then it's really getting into, the number of options and that sort of thing. So I think this is a good starting point. And then yours is a good list too. It's, 9 different options and 9 scenarios. And there's probably another 9 that we could go through and with, so.
Well, right. And obviously the question I have on the agenda item is, which of these should be among the 4 options that ultimately we convey to the consultant?
Well, if we're just going for qualifications right now, do we need to be that definitive on the number of options at this point?
Beyond what's already in the RFQ?
Right. So
I don't think we do, but at some point we have to engage on it. And so Chris and I put this on the agenda to see whether or not you wanted to talk about that now. If you think it's premature to do that, then fine, we'll just postpone that to another meeting. It's no big deal.
I think it's a good start, Peter, what we want to talk about now, but I think once a consultant is selected, then there should be a brainstorming session with a consultant, right? And this is where you sit down, we talk through all these different things and we say, okay, here's those 3 or 4 that we want you to put your time into. But I mean, it's good that we all are, these are good, like I said, this is a good list and we continue and the report, is kind of similar to what we were talking about. And although there was a new location that I wasn't aware of that they put in the report, option C. I don't know if you guys looked at that. It's on the east side of town.
Yeah, I saw, and I wanted to ask you, and maybe Chief, can you tell us what the 3 locations were? There was one on the east side of town. There was one on sort of north central, and then there was one sort of southwest central, I think.
One was existing, right? Yeah.
Can you tell me what specific locations they used, or did they?
I can. I don't want to walk on one of you. The 2-person team that came to do the fire department analysis kind of drove around town to get their bearings, and in doing so felt as they came into town and the area where Holland Way intersects Hampton Road, obviously now it's Access Sports Medicine. For the old timers, you remember it was the county courthouse. There's a significant piece of property there and a smaller piece of property that's still owned by the state of New Hampshire, kind of shoehorned in between Access and Hampton Falls Road. That was not identified as an ideal site. It was simply from a standpoint of public safety, they felt that being on Hampton Road with the intersection of Holland Way would allow us access to the highway, could facilitate a quicker response to the southeast or the Hampton, Northampton side, and still allow a fairly quick, we could argue all day, a 1-mile stretch of High Street at different times of the day, may or may not be quick, but allowed access back into downtown through the lights at Portsmouth Ave and down High Street to Water Street. So they simply looked at that piece of property and said, "Oh my God, look at it's parking." There would have to be some negotiative process, but they thought, if that were their community, that would be a site that they would explore. So they put it in. And then Brian and I sat and chatted with them about property we currently owned on White Oaks Drive. That was, again, a planning department process with the Riverwoods Corporation, and whether that was an ideal site. That's obviously.
So just quickly, Chief, in the previous report, they talked about ultimately from a insurance and from a risk standpoint that the downtown of Exeter, being the type of construction it was, its location, density, all these other items, was the greatest risk in the community, and that the proximity to that area and the speed to get to that area was a critical factor in that report. So I didn't see anything specific that talked about risk and loss and economic loss for the community in this particular report that would help us focus on the downtown area.
I don't think that's inaccurate. I don't think that was the charge or the drive of this last feasibility study, building, facility, and staffing. I think they spent a number of hours reviewing our staffing, our operations, and how we would work through that into the future, and sites. I don't think and again, I wasn't involved with the creating of an RFP to hire CPSM, but I don't think they were given that as their charge to identify risk. Although if you read the study, there's a significant part of the study that discusses the community's risk and high, 4-story buildings are greater, what we call a taxpayer on Water Street, which is a storefront with apartments overhead. So I think one that understands the fire service and what we protect, there's a significant amount in that study that discusses our risk. All of that being said, Rob, I agree with you. I think it still indicates the downtown core presents the largest risk for a large fire that's going to overwhelm our forces quickly, a large fire that's going to impact a huge piece of the tax base of the community. I think that's a no-brainer. I think there's no argument that the downtown core is the area we need to address as quickly as we can from a response. And I think
so.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So just as we're going through and we're developing a rating system for beginning to be able to evaluate the benefits of any of these sites, I think having identified some sites that are both on the center, east, and west side would be helpful, and then kind of put together a value system to which ones meet most of the criteria that we established, and that's part of the rating system we probably use to kind of go through each of the sites and determine which one's the best one.
Yep. No argument from me.
Okay, so we'll obviously put off consideration of any siting options until after the consultant's been hired, unless Chris wants to suggest that we do it earlier. And we'll just keep this list, and anybody else is obviously, I don't know whether you want to send me emails and I can add them to the list. I've taken notes from what we just said here, but I can add them to the master list, or just whenever we have the discussion, everybody can bring up their own.
Hey, Peter, this is Chris. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm lurking. I have about a half hour here where I can sit in, so I just wanted to listen in so I wouldn't have to catch up later. Yeah, I guess I was thinking we could start the discussion on the sites today and maybe up through 5 o'clock, unless there's an issue with that. I'll leave it up to you, Peter. You can run the meeting. If we don't do it today, I'm curious what would be the best venue, and this is for Dave and the town. When would be a good time, and who should be in that meeting where you develop a list and you start to refine it? And we've got one with Peter's options. I guess what's the process going to be for developing this list, approving it, and then starting the discussions and winnowing it down? How's that going to happen?
So, Chris, I think it would be good to have a consultant on board, right? With that, to have their input and to have I think having a brainstorming session like this, and we have a good list that's starting. I don't know if we have to give them an approved list. I think it's just giving them, maybe a draft or an idea, but it's, they may have some good thoughts as we talk through some of these options, and I don't know, just my opinion.
I agree. But I think before that, we need to put some thought into it and come up with something. And then we could say, maybe, we were leaning towards these series. We're trying to get the consultant to do as little work as possible due to the lack of fee that we have. And this is some of the internal work that I guess I thought we would, not just us as a group, but the town, the BRC, and whoever else would take this on to kind of move the project along, so that we don't just throw a bunch of stuff in the consultant's lap and say, okay, we need you to figure this out for us.
So I also think that one way we could also help this process too would be to define some of the things that are, success, what I call conditions for success. So what are the goals for the project, right? What's the goals? What are the things that are, how do you create a rating system? those would be some of the things that we could help them with, so that when they come in and they start looking and evaluating it, they can evaluate it against what we see as important to the community.
Yeah, Dave, what do you have? What are your thoughts on that in terms of coming up with all the site options and presenting them to the consultant?
Well, there are the few that are the obvious ones that are listed in the RFQ. And then beyond that, I have been researching, because land has to be available. There's not a ton of land left in Exeter that's available. And what is, either Mother Earth, ledge, or wetlands, or, very constrained, and it has to be available. It has to be for sale. So I'm not finding many, suitable sites, but I am looking toward that. I'm working towards that and continue to look and narrow it down to see what is available, and then anticipate getting the consultant on board and getting, have a further discussion, as Mark and Rob have indicated.
Maybe there's what we should do is come up with, Rob, what you were talking about, like what are our ultimate primary goals, or whatever. What are we trying to achieve? Some of these on the list that Peter sent it's really one option with sub options, right? It's just a location is the difference between the options, right? So there's different things like that, but I'm wondering if we just have what is the primary outcome? And so I'll go back to the recommendation of having a public safety complex that has fire and police together, right? They talked about that as a recommendation. I think we all agree the existing building can't do that. That's not going to be a legitimate public safety complex. So what do we come up with a goal that says that is a primary goal, is to have a public safety complex that has that, and then you know what I mean? And then maybe that's built somewhere else, and the existing fire department or existing public safety complex becomes fire. I don't know. Maybe that's where we can, and that gets to your rating system, Rob, that you're talking about, right? We're trying to, we start at a higher level. What's the most important thing? And then what is least important? And then we can develop that rating. Maybe that's where we can better serve our time to help.
That way you could actually go through each of the sites and very quickly either determine that they're don't meet enough of the criteria, or these are really good sites. And so, as opposed to going through and really investigating all of them, with a lot of time and effort.
Right. So maybe that's what it is. It's that criteria, right? It's us coming up with the criteria that we're asking the consultant to review with us on these options. And, so all of us may have different criteria or feel like something is stronger than the other. I don't know. And maybe maybe we do that instead of trying to figure out options, just trying to come up with that criteria.
I wonder if Chief Wilking...
I think coming up with the criteria first makes a lot of sense. I don't know whether we'll not need to come up with options. But I think that, the overall criteria is the framework to evaluate whatever options we want to discuss with the consultant, I think would be very helpful. So do you want to have each of us put down what they think their criteria are? Or Rob, do you want to draft a list of criteria? And we can circulate it so we can discuss it at the next meeting.
And would you include in the criteria the fire department response time for particular sites?
I would suggest that, Judy, that we would do that, right? You would come up with criteria, like performance criteria, what is the, I think it's listed in the report too about what the recommendations are. There's clear recommendations, right, through NFPA about response times and things like that. So I think that would be a good one for us to say that, our primary goal is this response time, our secondary goal is this. I think that would be important to put that in there. And then, I actually like the idea of the I think it was option C, having a location by Holland. I didn't realize it was Holland Way, but in that area, I mean, there's tremendous amount of housing and access is there, but I mean, the land, there just probably isn't the land available, but, so that was just a new one that I hadn't really thought much about having, that was a location.
I think that's the issue, Mark. I looked at that area. It's all residential. There's wet. That whole corner is wet by Holland Way. The state used to own. It's really challenging to find anything. And then if you find the upland, say you find it could be multiple owners and it's not for sale, and it's so right. I'm continuing to research that to try to, based on the study and where these locations are, to try to find if there are any options. That limits our options if nothing's available.
But I think but to me that comes down to the process though too, Dave. Right? So we say ideally, that's where we could do this, but there just isn't any land available, or it's not cost effective. But it's been documented, or at least in public session. So 5 years from now, we can say, well, we looked at that, and this is why they didn't go that way. If assuming we go a different path or on a different process. But yeah, I mean, I think this is part of what we wanted to do, right? Is to uncover everything on the table, and then.
Dave, if we have some thoughts, should we just send them to you maybe to do some additional investigation, so that if there are any ideas that people have, I've got a couple that may be options, but I'd rather have you go through and determine whether they're any viability based upon either town property or any other criteria that we have.
Sure. Yeah, excellent. That would be good. And then I would suggest just sending it to me, because if this is private property, we have to be sensitive about that, about throwing it out there where these are located. And then B, if we were actually serious about negotiating or acquiring this, we don't want to do it in a public forum. So if everyone just, sends those to me, I will coordinate it from there.
Okay, Rob, back to the criteria. Thank you, Dave. Back to the criteria. Do you, Mark, or do you, Rob, or do you, Amanda, want one of you to pull together a draft of criteria that can be used to basically evaluate any of the options?
I think we have our website, so I think the reality is we could actually start a document on there, share that document, and actually start to put down some ideas as far as criteria.
Rob, when you say criteria, are you thinking like each of us just write down, and this includes the Judy and the chiefs, that like what is important to them? What is a successful project? What are we trying? What goal are we trying to write? So I mean, there's going to be a lot of these, right? And then we can combine them into some primary. So it's what each person, we just did that, right? Like what would a successful project be? What are we trying to meet? What are we trying to accomplish? Right. Okay. I just want to be clear what we're trying to do with this.
Those would potentially change, but if we start out with, a baseline of information, so I think it helps evaluate. And also, as you go through the project, you can use those as a method to test whether you're staying true to your original intent and goals.
Would you include criteria such as a good possibility of being passed by voters? Would that kind of thing be included or not?
I think probably one of the things that we're looking at is exactly that, Judy. I mean, all of our goal is really to create a project that is going to it's going to meet the needs of the community. That's probably the number one. And then two is that it's a project that's put together that it has enough information that people can make a informed decision about whether to move the project forward into, one, under the warrant, and two is to get it passed and built. So.
So we should all just, Rob, you want to start the shared drive document and then the rest of us can just add to it?
Yeah.
So it's ready for us to look at the next meeting, please? Is that all right? Or
Will do.
okay. Thanks. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the working session. And so I guess we're done with the public safety stuff. So chiefs, you're more than welcome to stay on, and Judy, but we're not going to go back to the public safety issues and facilities and RFQ and all of those things. So we're just going to do a bunch of internal, committee working stuff.
Farewell. Happy spring.
So you don't need a vote.
Dave, I need you. Dave, we need you here. But the chiefs and obviously.
I was waving goodbye to Judy.
I got to bounce, so
Okay.
I will catch up to you later.
Yeah, Chris.
Thanks.
See you, Chief.
So the next, I'm sorry,
Bull and bailed.
Chief, when we get into this, I think you're going to want to bail too.
Fair enough.
This is, obviously you're welcome to stay. I sent everybody a copy of the draft milestone timelines. What are we going to do and when? Before the meeting, I don't know if anybody's had a chance to look at it, but if you have, the questions are these the right tasks on the left side? And are these the right dates throughout the spreadsheet? Dave, I sent everybody a copy of the letter, the memo that Russ passed out, and I put those dates in this draft. And I hope I got them right. But I would ask the committee if there are issues or if we've missed putting something in that we need to, as to what the facilities committee does or doesn't do and by when. It would be helpful for everybody to raise those things so that we can revise this. This allegedly is on the shared drive, but I have to admit to you that I have been unable to figure out how to save a document. So that's the reason I printed it off and sent it to all of you.
Do you want to share your screen, Peter, just so we're looking at the same thing, or I have it up?
If I can, sure. I sent it to you, Mark.
Yeah, I have it here. I was just wondering, just so we're all looking at the same thing. Dave's got it. Okay, good.
Thanks, Dave. Obviously, TM is town manager, TP is Dave. Dave, have I missed anything in terms of the process?
You're on mute, Dave.
Dave, you're on mute.
Technical difficulty. So, Peter, my only comment on this is that because you have us meeting with department heads, because they also meet with the budget recommendation committee also, right? The department heads.
They do that, yeah. When they review the budget recommendations committee, subcommittees go out and sit with the department heads, and then when the recommendations are ready by the subcommittee, normally the department heads attend that meeting so that the full budget committee can ask them questions about the subcommittee's recommendations.
Yeah, so I guess my comment is just so that we're not adding another some more work that the department has. Just maybe is there a way to coordinate that? So we're going with the budget, the subcommittees meet with the department heads. That would be my only thing, is just trying to minimize the added work to the department head. So that seems like that's about the same timeline, right? In mid-July, is that when that process is happening?
No, that's more in the fall.
Oh, the budget is not late? It is, okay. All right.
It's September.
September, October.
It's October.
Yeah.
It's October, Mark. And we need to sit with them beforehand. And the budget committee will get into a lot of policy and program kinds of stuff. But they're going to be looking a lot at the numbers. And I think we're going to need to have our information so we can make recommendations to them. We're going to need that sooner.
Okay. No, that's fine.
And we're going to need, the way it's written, because the department heads meet with the town manager and the town planner in mid-July. Shortly after they meet with that, I thought we would need to meet with the department heads so that we can make recommendations, if we want to the town manager and to the town planner before they submit the CIP to the planning board.
Just a quick thing. Could Dave, when you guys start the budget process, you give a form in which you have each of the department heads fill out?
Yes. Yes. It's that CIP form.
Right.
And most of it's a 6-year plan. So in theory, only new things are added. And, and everything kind of moves up a year from last year. In the perfect world, there is some manipulating of that. But then new projects are added, 5-6 years out. So add to last year.
So to kind of streamline this a little bit, could we, in that original survey or submission by the department heads, is if they have a request or a need for anything that's facility related? That way we'd be able to determine who we actually really needed to meet with versus meeting with everybody.
That's what I was going to jump in and say, exactly that. There's only a couple of department heads. And I mean, there's like 11 department heads, but only 4 of them are submitting projects. And I think only 2 of them are submitting facility projects, or 3 in the whole CIP. So it's a small group. It's doable. I appreciate Mark's, point about meeting, but I think it's small enough group. We can work with you.
Any other comments about the timeline?
No, not for me.
So Dave, can you live with this timeline?
Yes.
Okay, and obviously, thank you. It's obviously not in concrete. It's just for us to work toward. And so, but this will give us something that will be useful for planning purposes, so that we're not at the last moment writing the letters or the testimony. And that will be more of a regular part of the process earlier on, which hopefully will reduce the pressure on the last minute letters and other documents. Okay, so there's no vote required for that either. And if it's on the shared drive, if again, there are things that people want to change or add or subtract from, go ahead and do it. And then we can discuss it again next meeting, sorry. The next item in the working session was the facility master plan goals and framework. And I did not have a chance to talk with Chris about that. But I guess I would ask if are we at a point where we can discuss goals and framework for the facility master plan?
I'd really like to get the first part of it, which is our facilities conditions assessment done.
I was going to say the same thing. I just, that's really that's the basic, that's the beginning, that helps you with it. That gives you the input that you need to start to think about master planning.
So I did put into our shared drive, I went through and put all the properties in, and then I put some commentary next to the properties, which had to do with projects that have been gone through and items in perpetuity for different properties to kind of at least give some sort of background. And then per our comments before was to how can we build enough information so that we could hand this off to somebody so that they could begin to formulate a database that we can put information into.
So who would ultimately own this? Should we ask or talk to Public Works about putting this in for a CIP into the process about doing this, or can the planning department do this?
Yeah, we're going to go through Dave Sharples.
Can Dave put in a CIP? It's a thing in their operating budget that you should be able to do. But I know that you have $100,000 line on maintenance, and this would eat up a big portion of it. So I feel like we've been for 2 years been hitting a wall with this. So
may I ask a question? Like, what year? Putting it in the CIP may or may not help, but usually you put it in years out. You're looking for next year.
Ideally now. Yeah. So
okay. Yeah. I'll renew that. I talked a couple of times with the town manager about it, so I'll renew that conversation and I'll report back next month.
At least if we could at least get the RFP out or whatever we want to do with it, so we can, because we've been throwing out a lot of numbers. I don't think it's gonna be that much, to be honest with you. Because there's not a lot of buildings that's going to take them a lot of effort. But I don't know.
I agree. So, but I think without knowing what the number is or without knowing what we're asking for, it'd be much better if we actually had a number to say, we'd like to have X. And at least most people would say if they knew what it was versus just, we'd like to have some money. Not sure what we can do with it. We'd like to have some.
Yeah, well, we don't want to do that because we've criticized all kinds of departments for making those kinds of requests. So we don't want to make one of those. My keen sense of the obvious. Well, let me ask you this. Dave, you said next month or next meeting that you might be able to give us a heads up on funding for the FCA.
Oh, okay, next meeting. I forgot we meet twice a month.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So we should, obviously, at one point, we were thinking we were going to try to jury rig something on our own based on the inputs of the list and what Rob, of course, has now told us he's done. But we should just hold off on that until we get word back as to whether we got any funding.
That's what I would suggest, yeah.
Yeah, it's
okay. Good. All right. Good.
So I think that just going back to that, Peter, I think the reality is that per the document I put down, which was put in there, is we can put thoughts into a document. So an example would be, say, take the town hall. The town hall, is X size, built next year. Its current utilization is at a ground level is a use as office function. Its main level is a community gathering space function. The upper level is a gallery function. There have been projects on the line for adding an elevator to it, adding a fire stair, or not adding it, adding a fire stair to it. And that some of the limitations have been in the past that the building doesn't have an overall programmatic use or goal for its future. What is it going to be used for? What's the problem we're trying to solve by doing something to that building? So that would be just kind of establishing some parameters around what we would want to study in a master plan, right? And so that would be, similar but there's not, for all of our comments, there's really not that many buildings. It's more about programs. It's about, if it's say the town offices, that has a very specific program. The building just happens to be one we own and we're using it. Doesn't necessarily support the functions that are going on in it.
Okay, well, we'll wait for Dave to come back with some kind of guidance. On the old business, we were hoping that Judy would be here to be able to ask her about the projected capital expenditures, debt service analysis that they keep saying is just around the corner. But my understanding is that it's not quite ready for prime time. And Dave, you had a sense as to when they were going to be getting closer to finishing.
Yeah, Russ is putting together several, or has put together already several financial sheets that I will send along to the Facilities Advisory Committee. And he's been working with Bob Kelly as well to put, to present it in the way Mr. Kelly is trying to present it. He wanted to look at tax impact and also bring in water and sewer fees and so forth. So Russ is working on that. He's got several documents already done that looking at long-term debt service and so forth and the impacts associated with that. And I'll forward that along to the committee.
Great, thank you. Obviously, our invitation to talk to DPW is on hold, although I don't know why it needs to be any more as far as we've worked through the PSC study. So I guess we could invite DPW to come in next meeting to talk about maintenance or other items, couldn't we?
Yeah.
Mark, you wanted especially to hear from them.
Yeah, I think it would be good. Just get an update, right? We're in the first quarter or first third of the year. That'd be great. Second quarter, I guess, right?
Do we also want to get an update on them on where their grand plan mega complex, et cetera, is? The garage that they can't seem to identify as with any background information for us. Should we ask them for that as well?
That's more of the summer thing, right? That's what we're talking about, meeting with them on the CIP process.
Yeah, I assume they're going to come at it again in this CIP, in the new one. There's no reason to, put them on the spot now if we think we're going to hear from them again. We'll just have to do a better job or they'll have to do a better job of getting us information. So we should just invite DPW just for the maintenance update.
That's fine for me.
Is that all right with everybody else?
Yeah.
I agree. I think there's probably enough to talk about on that one. And the opportunity maybe of part of our task to build some information is to maybe give some background sheets for those guys to start to fill in, or if they have a way of using their work order system to be able to do, reporting on any of the buildings or systems.
And I don't know what they use I mean, Jeff Beck obviously is the head maintenance guy, and I don't know now what he uses to fill out his plans. Dave, does Jeff have to update on a quarterly basis or a monthly basis the status of his maintenance projects?
I wouldn't know. I'm not involved in that.
Okay. Well, Chris or I can, if there's specific things beyond an update on current maintenance and future maintenance projects, if there's more specifics, if you want to shoot Chris an email or me an email, we can communicate that to Jeff, and hopefully he'll come ready to.
Right. I think that would be a good one to, as far as a request, is that their current work order process, their current project list, and kind of where they are.
Okay. Got it.
That's the
Okay.
May 20th meeting.
Sorry.
May 20th meeting.
Say again?
That is, you want to invite them to the May 20th meeting?
That's the next meeting, yes.
Yeah. Okay. I will pass along that invitation.
Can you also let us know relatively quickly if for some reason they're not going to want to provide us with this information?
Yes, I will. I will let you.
And
I'll confirm one way or the other as soon as I hear from them.
And then so you'll know what, based on what we've talked about now, what we want them to come with.
Correct.
And it would really be helpful if they could submit this stuff within a couple of days before the meeting so we can take a look at it.
Understood. I will ask them that.
Please. Okay, the next thing on the agenda was the town library. Chris wanted to discuss the update that we got last, I guess it was dated, well, I can't find it. He thought it was particularly vague, but since he's not here, did anybody else have issues? It was March 2021. I think, Dave, you were good enough to get that to us from Hope Godino. Did anybody on the committee think that we needed more specificity on that library renovation update?
Yeah, no, I mean, but I think that it's a good thing, Peter, to maybe establish some things that would be helpful for us to see, just as a dashboard of, all right, where are they in the project? When's completion, and how are they tracking the budget? Those are, would be common things we could ask for. And then what, anything that they see as issues that might have arisen.
So where are they in the project? Where are they tracking to the budget? Issues coming up, and what was the last one, Rob? You said something else.
Let's see. Should we have schedule, budget?
Yes.
Any, again, issues or just situational awareness issues that might be arising.
Okay. Well, I'll talk it over with Chris as to whether or not he wants to ask those questions of the library people. Well, I think they're good questions. Are there any other sort of status, questions that should be on a dashboard like that?
No, just looking at that project, generally, this to me reiterates our earlier concepts of having some town oversight of projects that happen within the community. I think it, based upon two things. One is our site visit, and two on what's going on there right now, which is they've removed the front door walkway to the building. So there's only a single means of egress out of that building right now. And when I see things like that, I get
There's another door on the other side.
Yes,
I'm not saying it's great, but there are.
So from the main level, from the main floor level, there is only a single means of egress. So it's,
Hey, Chief, are you still on?
I think
I guess he's.
yeah. So I think what it does is it for having somebody who's a eyes and ears for the town, and it's something that as we help budget for projects in the future, it's something we really should make sure that we should be accounting for in those budgetary items, is to have somebody who's protecting the town from construction.
Am I going to get myself into trouble now?
Yeah. No, it's just talking about to them taking the ramp down in the front and only having one way out of the building.
Okay, I was working on another project. Remind me of the building.
The library.
Yeah, I'd have to look and I would ask fire prevention to weigh in, but I honestly was unaware the ramp was coming down.
I figured this. So it's basically making sure that if, and you know this, Chief, is that if they have a town-owned property and they're doing something like that, is doing an interim life safety plan. And the interim life safety plan would basically, they would have to submit that. And then obviously the chief would be great if the chief had some eyes on something like that, make sure that our residents are protected. But this goes back to that for us advising the town to say, if you're going to budget something, put some money in there so that you have some third party oversight or somebody else having oversight, whether it's even a town employee or, somebody to help with projects like this.
Yeah. Aside from the obvious fact that the ramp is missing, I would be very surprised, and I could eat my words tomorrow, but very surprised if this was designed by a reputable architect and firm that it has been removed without the ability to meet all the life safety requirements. It would be out of the realm of my history in the fire service that a building like that.
They're rebuilding it. They're going to rebuild it, but the reality is right now during construction, it doesn't exist. So I was in there last week, and when you go to the main level, the only way you can get is that one center stair. That's the
we typically give some latitude during construction processes, regardless if it's a town building or another agency in town that's doing significant renovations to multi-story buildings. It can't be forever, and it can't be for the masses. But we would have looked at that, and like I said. And I don't speak to my fire prevention officer every day. It could have already come through the office and they granted them 90 days or whatever. So before we all jump on and say that, they didn't do that, I can report back to you on that. But we would typically give them time to get it constructed and not.
No, definitely. So part of that would be as the public. So here I am. I do this a fair amount as the public walking through a facility and not seeing either, other exit signs or anything else, or a map or any other determinations of a safety thing. I look at that and I say, it doesn't appear that an interim life safety plan was done. And then we have to go into this. I'm just saying that part of our advisement sometimes is to have somebody as a third party to help the town manage projects like this, both on a physical management, also on a financial management.
Fair enough.
Thanks, Chief. All right, so Rains Farm, update from Amanda. Amanda, is there a Rains Farm update?
Well, yeah, we had a nice little conversation as sort of a follow-up from when we were there, and I was asking some questions about accessibility. And so we had a conversation on Monday morning, actually, and it was great. It was super productive. I think it's a couple different areas. They're going to look at where to put parking, obviously. They're going to look at some sort of it would only need to be really small, little ramp into the physical building itself. There's just a tiny step. But really from the parking lot to the building is the big part. So trying to find the best route, but also I brought up the idea of Moby mats, which, yeah, seeing head nods. And so it was kind of something that we were wondering. I also talked to Greg at Parks and Rec about it, and he was super into it too, that it might be something that he would be able to use at different events, and how it might be something good for the town to have, especially if someone's willing to store it and they're mobile, to be able to use at different events where it might be needed. So
I think that's a really good idea, especially if you have multiple outdoor venues and you want to be able to use it, in different places. I think having some mobile ones. When I was at the hospital, we had some mobile ones where we were able to go out, both either rolling ones as well as folding units. Very helpful to be able to use in different locations.
cool. Yes, I think Kristen was going to start pursuing what might be the best avenue for getting something like that. And does it need to be owned by, it doesn't need to be owned by the Rains Farm Committee, right? Like it could just be a town thing and maybe they store it, or, so that was pretty cool. So we'll keep up with that. And we also talked a little bit about future potential around the field. There's a trail that's not very established yet. And so we use the Forest Service pocket guide for grades and things like that. And they're starting to look at if that's something they want to build out down the line, just doing their best to make it accessible. So it was good.
Did they make a big pitch for their whatever $100,000 or $200,000 that they needed for repairs to match some kind of L-chip grant?
We weren't
go
talking
into that
about
very much?
We didn't talk about that.
Sorry?
We didn't talk about that.
Okay.
Well, another thing about that too is that obviously one of the things that we asked them was, what can we do to help them? Mm-hmm. So I think this is a good discussion about in general, what is our facility's attitude towards the complex and support, obviously, for them going for the money, right? And so I think that would be per your comment, Peter and Amanda's, again, as a committee, do we support their ask for the $100,000? Do we feel it's a warranted item?
Yeah, they did. That was one thing that we did talk about, was asking us if we could write a letter.
Do we want to talk about that now, or do we add that for an agenda topic for another one? I mean, I think my opinion is that if the town's going to continue to own the property, then you got to maintain the property. So and I feel like that they made a good case about what they want to do with it, and that and I think if the leadership of the town agrees that it's something long-term that they're going to have, then we should support trying to maintain that. Otherwise, it's going to get worse, and we get stuck with something that's going to cost more down the road. So that's my 2 cents if we're wanting to talk about it.
And I didn't go to the meeting, so I don't really have the benefit of what you all heard. I guess my question is, considering the scramble we're having just to get $25,000 for the facilities condition assessment, and considering what we know we're going to face from a debt services point of view, as far as really high priority projects such as the public safety center and maybe the garage, and then whatever's in the rest of the maintenance budget we don't know about. I mean, how high a priority is $100,000 for Rains Farm compared to all the other things that we're supposedly worrying about as far as funding?
Peter, I think that we should just evaluate it on its merits and let the town decide that. I just don't think that that's our charge. I just don't.
Well, if that's not our charge, Amanda, then we shouldn't be doing any of the stuff we've been doing.
We're doing a lot of
we should have written. we shouldn't have written the report on the Parks and Recreation Department.
Probably agree.
We shouldn't have weighed in. We shouldn't have weighed in on any of the other things.
Yeah, we shouldn't weigh in on whether we should spend the money on it. That's not our charge. I'm really tired.
Well, I think it is.
And I'm not going to let you be the only one who gets to be a bully in meetings. So I think we should evaluate merits.
Why do you think I'm being a bully in this meeting? I'm just asking the question.
In many meetings, when it comes to money, Peter, and I'm not backing down this time.
I never asked you.
I don't think it's our charge to decide the priorities of town spending. That's for voters. And if Russ needs to come in here, or the select board needs to come in here and help us figure out if that's our charge or not, then let's do that.
Well, I think if you look at the charge that we already had approved by the select board, it is in our charter.
Well, maybe
so I guess you and I will just have to agree to we just have to agree to disagree.
And on this project, I stand and say that we should evaluate whether or not the project has merit and move on.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I would say, I think we need to evaluate whether the project has merit in relationship to other projects.
Sure. I hear you.
Again, we can agree to disagree.
I hear you. Yep. I hear you loud and clear.
So
now everybody knows
want to talk about
that, Rob and Mark. Been sitting on that for a very long time.
Well, I wish you'd come to me and told me about all this.
No, it's public. I want it to be public.
Okay. I mean,
so
I guess if other people.
What else do we want to talk about with the project?
Well, I think that I'll have to reiterate with what Mark said earlier is that ultimately for all of us is that if we have a town-owned property and we have it, we own it, we have a responsibility to do something with it and maintain it, and to be advisors to the town to help with, managing and maintaining them. So part of that too is that to me is that there is a financial part of it, but the drivers ultimately should be is the advisory part of it is how I would couch that. So
I definitely think there should be the financial part of, do we think this is the price fits what they're asking for? Absolutely.
Right. So and I think that's obviously each of us will bring something a little different to the table, and I think that it's good that every once in a while we do have people expressing their opinions one way or the other. So I think it's great.
Thanks, Rob.
I don't disagree with anything you said, Rob. Okay, any new business?
I just have one question for Dave, and I don't know if you have this, Dave, is how much of, I know at some point in time they had done a kind of a build out plan for the town of Exeter and with a kind of an idea about how much buildable land, and again, this is hypothetical or kind of how much land is there and where the town was in a total build out.
That has been in the works for several years, but we haven't completed that yet because I put it in my studies money. It's in my studies money and it's only 5,000. It got reprioritized for a grant one year. Then it didn't get funded. It got cut out. And so I hopefully am going to do that this year.
Because those are some of the things I think just from a planning standpoint, especially when like talking about public safety buildings, parks and rec, all these other things, is that when I getting an idea about where we are in really in the overall development of the community, and it helps to me determine growth and how much we need to be able to think about future items. So that'd be actually a good one, Dave, to have as far as information.
Well, while I fully agree and I push for it, there is a little bit of an X factor, particularly in Exeter, because about 450 units got added in the last few years through the approval process that receive variances from the ZBA. So when you do a build out, you do it on current zoning ordinance, and you look at the land and say, well, this land's 0 residential units. But then there's 224 units that go there. So there is a little bit of an X factor with that. But we are going, ahead to get a solid understanding, but there are things that can change that. So.
Oh yeah, but at least it's a baseline, right?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. I just wanted to mention that though, because it's kind of ironic that the last 5 out of the last 600 residential units that were approved were in zones that didn't allow them to be there.
Rob, are you asking because of the public safety study? Are you asking this issue?
Yeah, public safety and just in general, like it says, like public safety, one of the things that they mentioned in that report had to do with future growth and expansion of the community. So I just wanted to, as we're going forward, it's nice information to have about what is the trajectory. If we went to a more form-based code scenario on Portsmouth Avenue, we had a lot more variety to what actually happens on that road. Obviously, that would change, similar to what you just talked about, David. It completely change what the character of the community could be and how much property there's. The reality is new buildings, though, would have much more sophisticated fire protection systems, from a construction standpoint and everything else. They're a lot less risky than, say, an old brick wood frame building in downtown.
Yeah, but it would still be helpful because you have the emergency response, right? And also police. But I think it's a really good point to see where potential of expansion or development could be. I mean, if it's in Portsmouth Ave or even the east side of town, or they built it. There's been a lot of housing units added up on High Street, right, in that area. So it's a good point about where density could get more dense, where it could get more dense, right? Areas of the town where it could get more dense.
I don't think I have any. I don't have any new business besides that, Peter. Just more of an aside.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else have any new business?
No.
Okay, great. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Rob, that's you.
I'm making a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Darn it, man. Good to.
Hey, Dave, I'll stay on if you don't mind to give you those typos, if that's okay. And so I guess we vote to adjourn. Anybody object to adjourning?
No.
Great. Hearing no objections, meeting's adjourned.
All right,
Thanks.
nice.
See ya.
Yeah, everybody.